All right. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari 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 Om. We'll begin with some invocation mantras here. Sitting up straight. If you don't know the mantras, you can just enjoy the sound vibration. Ooh. Om Shrim Hrim Kling Glam Gam Ganapate Namaha. Om Shrim Hrim Kling Glam Gam Ganapate Namaha. Om Shrim Hrim Kling Glam Gam Ganapate Namaha. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace. Welcome, friends. Yoga Sutras. So before we jump into the Yoga Sutras, I'm just going to make a couple announcements about upcoming things. In June, July, and August, the second and fourth Thursday, from 5:30 until 6:45, I'll be doing a mantra and yoga asana class. So we're going to do in-depth teachings on mantra. And it came to mind as I was chanting those two invocation mantras, because the first class, we're going to learn about that Ganesha Bija mantra, why it's used, its meaning, how to chant it to circulate energy through the body. Second class, we're going to get into the Guru mantra, which we chanted, and then we'll continue with all the classes going in depth with each mantra. And we're going to look at how to use invocation mantras to start an asana practice, how to use mantra during an asana practice, and how mantra relates to your daily life. So if you're on my email list, you'll get information about that. Or you can contact me in various ways if you have any questions about it. And with that, we'll just keep on going here, jumping into the Yoga Sutras. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is where we left off. We've been discussing Vairagya and Abyasa. So practice and non-attachment. Practice and non-attachment are two important aspects in our sadhana. And the last three classes, we've been talking about the misunderstandings that often happen around the concept of non-attachment. Non-attachment as a enforced concept versus non-attachment as an expressed reality, or the loving state that comes from non-attachment versus the dogmatic attitude that comes from preaching non-attachment versus being non-attached. So we don't need to go into that, everything that's been talked about in the last three classes. We went into a lot of detail on that. But I wanted to kind of pick up and bring up that we had been discussing that. And because it kind of ties into where we're going. Because now we're going to talk a little bit more about practice and or what we would call abhyasa. We're also going to talk about the word sadhana, because both of the words sadhana and abhyasa are important in our spiritual practices. And we will touch a little bit on non-attachment here and there. So we were talking about genuine non-attachment, and going back to the Sanskrit etymology, the word Vairagya means without coloration. So it's without any conditioning or without any imprints. It's a pure state of consciousness. So when someone tells you, you need to be more non-attached about X, that is somebody telling you what to do because their conditioned mind is uncomfortable with your suffering or something else along those lines. It's usually not useful advice, and often it comes from a place of a lot of ego. So, but genuine non-attachment is a major shortcut. Now, the trick comes is that a lot of us are posers when it comes to non-attachment, which we were classifying as tamasic non-attachment. So, telling other people what to do, that where there's no actual real attachment, and that's actually showing how attached we are, that people need to be different than what they really are. Now, if someone's your spiritual teacher and all that, there's different modes, and it can be appropriate at times, or the discussion of how to let go of our grasping. It's available and it's an option, but we need to be focusing on love and compassion more than trying to tell other people what to do or avoiding life's issues. So abhyasa is, we're going to go into the etymology of the word abhyasa tonight. Abhyasa is more of a consistent thing that takes time. And the Yoga Sutras even specifically say that abhyasa means it needs to be repeated for a practice needs to be repeated for a long period of time. So we'll get into it here. But just, I want to go on this little tangent first before we actually get into the sutras. I've been listening to Paramahamsa Pragyanananda recently on YouTube, and he's my Kriya Yoga teacher, if I can even claim that. He's quite a lofty person and has pretty high expectations. But yes, I go see him and touch his feet and all that. But he has been talking about asuras. So asuras means demons. Are you guys familiar with that word? Yeah. So asura, this is a quote I wrote it from YouTube. It was, asuras also meditate. Asuras means people with demonic nature. They also meditate. Ask yourself, is your meditation asuric or divine? So this is just one chunk that I took, and I listened to a couple of his lectures, and they're very fresh lectures, like stuff he's been doing in the last couple of weeks. He's in the US right now. And he was talking about, I can't say the asura's name, the demon's name, but he was a very powerful king, and I forget how his name's very long. It's one of those long Sanskrit names. But he was meditating, and he was going to meditate for 10,000 years so that he could gain power and gain more control and more dominance. But then he decided the 10,000 years wasn't enough, and then he decided to do 36,000 years of penance to get control of things. After he did that, he had been meditating on Brahman, the creator, and then the creator came, and then he wanted a boon, and he wanted to be made immortal. And so now this is all about him becoming, he wasn't doing this to like realize God or to become a better person. He was doing it for his own personal power. And so this is what Pragyananda keeps talking about. It's like, are we doing our meditation so we can become more beautiful, more attractive, and more to gain, or are we doing it as a devotional practice and to create more humility and more love? So I enjoyed that he was talking about this because I felt like it kind of related to what I've been talking about around spiritual bypassing and people wanting to kind of disassociate and claim lofty spiritual states. But then there are also like often people who are living in very privileged bubbles that are doing that kind of thing. So I just wanted to share that quote before we actually get into the I got more slides on it. So asuras are people, or it's actually, if you go way back in the Vedas, it gets into different meanings, what asura meant in the Vedas. And then as you got into the Puranic time period, it had a different meaning, which is how people refer to it now. So the devas are the divine beings, and they're the good guys. And then the asuras are the demonic sort of, they're both kind of otherworldly though. So devas and asuras, they're not regular humans. Although you could say that we all have divine, or we are all devas, and we also all have asura tendencies. So we all have negative and positive tendencies. So the big difference is asuras are always looking for more power, more prestige, more honor, reputation, and gain, as Emanuel Swedenborg says, if you're familiar with him, honor, reputation, and gain, driven by our ahamkara, our separate sense of self. So, I'm Mr. Awesome because I'm using Sanskrit words teaching Yoga Sutra right now, right? So that would be the ego mind. The non-ego mind would be like, I'm doing this work to be of service to others, to illuminate my own mind and to illuminate others' minds, and to help spread positive teachings to the world. So the outer package can look the same, very similar, but it's really the inner intention. And even our inner attention, we can have both. We can have split attentions. So I won't name anyone here, but there's a couple friends of mine, and then somebody who we don't know as well, but this one of our friends really likes this one person, and another friend of ours said, well, he's in asura though. Can't you tell that he's doing this all, he's not doing it to really build community and to build relationships with people. He's doing it to make himself look special. And our other friend didn't like that we were like, don't you see that? And so my friend called the other guy an asura, which says something about my social circle, I guess. But so devas, or when we're in our divine nature, we're working for the benefit of all beings, and we're in alignment with Dharma. When we're being asuric or demonic, we're being self-centered, thinking about ourselves, and we're being adharmic, so the opposite of Dharma. Now, an interesting thing, in the Ramayana, the story of Ravana, who kidnapped Sita, if any of you are familiar with the basic premise of the Ramayana, but Ravana was a Brahmin priest. He was a pujari, so he would do big rituals and stuff like that. He was very devoted to Lord Shiva, but he was a demon. He was asuric. Now, he also stole Sita from Ram and brought her to Sri Lanka, because he was so possessed by her beauty, he wanted to control and have it and own it for himself. Now, the interesting thing, as the whole Ramayana goes on, even though Ravana had done all kinds of horrible things, at the end, he gets realization because he was so focused on Ram and so focused on Shiva that all of his negative demonic tendencies eventually got turned around. So that's once you get into the whole Ramayana, which just enough to be dangerous. So yeah, are we more interested in beauty, wealth, prestige, and power, or love, service, sacrifice for other, and cultivating love and kindness? So I just wanted to run over that topic. Not totally sure how it relates, but it seems to in my mind. That's what I was thinking about this week. So now we're going to look at the word abhyasa, which is used in the Yoga Sutras. Abhyasa so here on this slide, we've got a couple of its meanings. And then we'll go into the etymology next. So it means to repeat practice. So repeating a practice over and over. It also means continued or continuous practice, something that has cohesion over a long period of time. It's like reaching towards a goal. Abhyasa is reaching. It also means habit, like the things that we become ingrained in doing over and over again. Custom. So abhyasa can be like a lot of spiritual practice can get into cultural customs, like traditions, things like that, like chanting mantras specifically. And then to be consistent or constancy, like having that over and over and over and over again. So those are the more surface meanings of the word. And then when we get a little bit deeper, abhyasa, it comes from the Sanskrit root word abhi, which means going toward or approaching or for the sake of. So it's kind of like trying to achieve something. And then when we go in a little bit deeper, the second half, I'm sorry. So abhya is the first half. The second half of the word is asa, which sounds a lot like asana. So comfortable pose. So to seat, a comfortable seat or a form. So, and then another one of the Sanskrit roots is just asa, which is to sit quietly. Japa raised her hand. Let me see if I can.
Hello. Can I ask, is it related to the root of tapasya? And what is the tapas overlay with abhyasa? If you know.
I think I actually do know, which is
I,
surprising. So
I knew you would.
I've sometimes, I was thinking about you, Japa, because I was listening to Pragyanananda, and I forget which day it was, but on YouTube, he knows all the stuff like by memory. Like I have to I still study it, but he just drops all the etymology, like in a talk, he just drops it all the time. But drops meaning makes reference to it. But top means to put pressure on. Top. So like one of my friends, Tapasyananda or Top Ananda. They're like different Swami names. So Tapasya is Asya is like the action of doing. So one who's putting pressure on. And yes, as I understand it in this moment, subject to more research, it is the same grammatical ending. So the form of or the seat of pressure that transforms or that which makes us sweat. Tapasya is referring to that which makes us sweat or the pressure of transformation. Pragyananda, who I'm bringing up a lot tonight, he refers to it as the heat which is going in and out with every breath. So there's that's a form of tapasya, to watch every breath. He says that in that Yoga Sutra there. Larry's holding his copy and I've got my copy here. But so tapasya, to the pressure to burn, to feel the heat, and then in that form of, or sitting quietly within that form of fire.
Doesn't it also mean discipline?
Discipline, yes. Yeah. Austerity. Austerity is like a kind of simple, yeah. So the etymology is always like a little bit like deeper meaning of the word. So that's what I was with this, particularly with abhyasa. We just went over like the more general meanings, and now we're looking at when you split the Sanskrit roots apart. And so discipline or austerity are its like general terms, and then when you look at it, it's got tapasya. So the first part of the word is the fire, the pressure, and then asya, to do or with a seat or to sit quietly. So great question, Japa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can just unmute yourself and interrupt. But I did see your hand. It's the way I've got my screen set up. It's a little funny, but okay. So now some of you might have been thinking, when we talk about practice, there's two common words in the yoga community that we hear: abhyasa, which is brought up here in the Yoga Sutras, and sadhana. So what's the difference between abhyasa and sadhana? They both would be just generally, you could call them practice. So I wrote this out earlier. I'm just going to read it. Abhyasa is practice in a general, all-encompassing sense. So abhyasa is guided by higher reasoning in our life in general. It refers to making decisions. So decision-making, our mindset, based upon what will bring the greatest tranquility and peace of mind. So abhyasa is practical action that lays the groundwork towards self-realization. So sadhana, on the other hand, refers to practices in a more specific sense. So it relates to a formal practice. You could say like time on the mat or time on the cushion. If you're Hare Krishna, you do 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra every day. That's your sadhana. It's a very specific vehicle with a specific goal. So abhyasa is more universal, like how is your lifestyle practice as a wholeness? And then sadhana tends to be more specific, like in the Kundalini yoga community, early morning sadhana. which like me and a friend started jokingly they should call it middle of the night because it starts at 3:30, 3:45, middle of the night sadhana. Early morning is like 6. When you're at 3:45, that's the middle of the night. So middle of the night sadhana, as an appropriate guy here says. So yeah, sadhana, and then in specific traditions, there's very specific recommendations. So if you're initiating a Kriya Yoga, you do the Kriya Yoga sadhana as suggested by the teachers that you're following. If you're doing a bhakti practice, like some people do a lot of bhakti with the murtis and offering flowers and incense, all that kind of aspects of bhakti. Some people, it's just a mantra sadhana. It's a different modes. Jnana yoga, if you're going to do really focused sadhana on like self-inquiry, you're just going to constantly deconstruct the nature of the mind. You could practice. I'm not going to go into all the Jnana yoga things, but you could do neti neti or who am I? Tell me who I am. Tell me who you are. Like all these different contemplations. So I'm waiting to shoot off on what Jnana yoga is, so my brain's malfunctioning. So I don't quote Iyengar very often, but I came on this when I was on the internet today. So Iyengar was defining the difference between sadhana and abhyasa. So sadhana is a discipline undertaken in the pursuit of a goal, where abhyasa is repeated practice performed with observation and reflection. Repeated with observation and reflection. So he's talking a little bit more about the mental qualities, which is more general, and then sadhana and a pursuit or goal. So interesting point here. The second chapter of the Yoga Sutra is called the Sadhana Pada, where the first chapter is called the Samadhi Pada, which is all about samadhi. I don't think we'll get there in the slides that I prepared today, but we're getting close to Sutra 17. And Sutra 17 is when they finally start to talk about samadhi in the Samadhi Pada. And that's when he first brings it up. So within the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras, the Sadhana Pada, there's 2 types of yoga that are specifically talked about: Ashtanga yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, and Kriya yoga. Is it the first or second verse? Tapaha Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanava Kriya Yoga. So Kriya yoga is tapasya, which we were talking about, to sweat, to do austerity. Tapasya, Swadhyaya, self-study, study of the self. And then Ishvara Pranidhanava, so devotional surrender. So Bhakti, Karma, and Jnana yoga. To sweat, it's Karma yoga. And then Jnana yoga, self-inquiry, Bhakti yoga, devotional surrender. That is the 3 components of Kriya yoga in the Yoga Sutras. Now, how that relates to the famous Kriya yoga, my teachers say that it is the teaching on Kriya yoga, and I agree with that. And then I see how other people frame it in different ways. But that's another can of worms. I'm gonna have to control myself. So sadhana, in a general sense, means to discipline, to take on an action of discipline. Accomplishment, to go for an accomplishment, like I'm going, like every day, like in the 3HO community, the Yogi Bhajan 3HO community, when you do your early morning sadhana, it's a victory. It's like a big thing that they talk about. Like you've conquered, you woke up early, and you did it. It's an accomplishment. Fulfillment. And these are just words in the Sanskrit dictionary for the word sadhana. And sometimes these words have multiple contextual meanings. So they don't always totally relate to it as a spiritual practice, but these are just some different meanings of the word. Completion, to have completion. Worship or adoration, which is interesting. It's like a bhakti mode of sadhana, a means of accomplishing things. And it's from the root word sadhu. And sadhu, you guys are familiar with sadhus. So swamis are sadhus, and there's various kinds of sadhus out there. The word sadhu means to go straight to the goal. So you could almost say that anybody who does sadhana is a sadhu. If we're doing a lot of spiritual practice, when I was in 3HO, everybody always used to say I was a sadhu. It was like the the thing. You're such a sadhu, because I did like a crazy amount of like I did a lot of practice, and I was not really focused on jobs or anything like that. So I was a sadhu in that community. A lot of my friends would call me that, but it's also a name, like as far as I know, only a male name, Sadhu Singh. Yes, so going straight to the goal, going for the spiritual practice. The sadhu does sadhana. So I kind of already was riffing on this when I'm bringing up here in the slide. So when we're talking about abhyasa or sadhana, it can be in any kind of yogic context. Bhakti, karma, jnana, raja yoga, and hatha yoga, all of the different kinds of yoga. And I am under the influence of schools that think that we mix and match these things per our temperament. I am a little judgmental of the schools where it's like bhakti yoga is superior, or, a lot of the Shankaracharya people, jnana yoga is supreme. Different people. It tends to be like mostly bhakti and jnana are arguing with each other about who's better, devotional path or the path of, inquiry. I really think that they're one and the same. There definitely is differences in application, and at different phases of different people's lives, these things are more pertinent and in different ways. So, coming from the line of Vivekananda and other people like that, Swami Shivananda also, people mix and match, and it can change over time. I was listening to a Vedanta Society Swami the other day, and he was saying that Raja Yoga, the path of meditation, is what fuses all of the other three yogas, bhakti, karma, and jnana. It's what fuses them together. And without that meditative awareness, it makes it very hard to hold to bhakti, karma, or jnana yoga. So he was claiming that there was a mistranslations of Vivekananda's stuff. So, all right. So Sutra 12. Finally, the book will become relevant. Abyasa, Vairagya Bhyam Tan Nirodha. Abyasa Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodha. Abyasa Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodha. So these mental modifications are restrained by practice and non-attachment. Usually put who translated that. Is that what it says in Pragyananda's book?
Well, it says, abhyasa, repeated practice, raja, detachment, non-attachment, disattachment.
Nice. So at the bottom of the slide here, I said notice that it has abhyasa and vairagya. Now, because of the Sindhi, the Sindhi is a Sanskrit grammar rule. Vairagya bhyam turns into like one big word. But it's putting these two things that are important in yoga, which is genuine non-attachment, not, jerky non-attachment. Genuine non-attachment with this practice. And practice is like in a holistic sense, how are you living your life? So our mental modifications are restrained. So that's tan nirodha. Nirodha is the movement of the mind, or the mental modifications are restrained by practice and non-attachment, vairagya. So Sutra 12 declares practice and non-attachment are the way of yoga. So these are the two big components. We need to have a structure, like the abhyasa is the structure of how we approach things. Like right now, because I'm in this life phase where I've got a 3-year-old, so I'm no longer sadhu Baba anymore. I'm now householder Baba. And so I was working on we've got some chickens, taking Yogananda's advice, getting some chickens. And he talks about that, and it's called World Crisis. It's a small lecture he gave. He's like, get some chickens, live somewhere where taxes are low, and try to have a simple life. He's got all of his little suggestions. But so I was making my chicken coop, and before I would go to the chicken coop, before I started to work on it, I'd say some prayers, and I would be like, every movement that I'm doing, every action that I'm taking, this is all a divine offering. So I was doing karma yoga with a mood of bhakti. So I was making it a prayer, and then turned on some Krishna Das, had it on repeat, and then just Ram Ram Ram, and I was doing my chicken coop. So doing work is worship. So Sutra 12 declares practice and non-attachment are the way. So Sutra 13 and 14 then define what practice is. And then Sutra 15 and 16 define non-attachment. So you've got one sutra that talks about two things, and then the next four sutras cover the definitions of those things. So Sutra 13, practice is the repeated effort to follow the disciplines which give permanent control of thought waves of the mind. So, practice is a repeated effort to follow disciplines which give permanent control of thought waves of the mind. So in regards to karma yoga, work is worship, right? So reminding ourselves over and over and again, I'm going to do the dishes. God's hand is washing God's plate, and the water is coming out of the faucet, and it's God, and the soap is God, and all of this is here, and my consciousness is observing it, making the work worship. So really getting into that. So that would be a discipline which would is known to, we have been told by the sages and the enlightened people, that if you do that over and over again, you will get a positive effect that could lead to pure enlightenment. Just through karma yoga alone, you can do it, right? Just through bhakti alone, just through jnana yoga alone, any of them alone, you could do it, or a mix of any of them. So Sutra 14, practice becomes firmly grounded when well attended to for a long time without break and in all earnestness. So basically they're saying, you got to go for it. you got to keep on it, keep on going. Now, luckily for especially my current mindset with this, particularly with abhyasa, it's not just sitting on the mat, it's the whole lifestyle. Now, going like sadhana, coming from the root word sadhu, going after the goal quickly, going after the goal intensely, when we can make that time to do more practice, then we'll get more results. Pragyananda brings this up a lot, but Lahiri Mahashaya suggests 3 hours a day, 3 hours, long enough that you could forget body consciousness when you do your Kriya practice, if one has the karma or disposition to do that. And if not, that's okay. So we're going to get into the Sutra 14, word by word. Practice becomes firmly grounded when well attended to for a long time without break and in all earnestness. So now I took this directly out of Pragyananda's Yoga Sutra. Sa means that, to, indeed. That indeed. Dirghakala, for a long period of time. Narantaraya, without interruption or continuously. So Pragyananda had this quote here, therefore remember me at all times and fight, from the Bhagavad Gita. So without interruption and continuously. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, remember me at all times, continual, unbroken awareness. Then the Pragyananda talks I've been listening to today, they're public talks, so he's not really teaching Kriya Yoga, but he's teaching the basics of Kriya Yoga, and he's saying, watch every breath. And he says that, I've heard him say that he has not missed a breath in like 35 years. He's watched every breath for the last 35 years. So when you're around him, it seems like it could be possibly true. So continual remembrance in whatever form. So if one's doing mantra repetition, or if you're doing breath observation, if you're listening to inner sounds, if you're doing contemplations on the I sense in Jnana Yoga, doing that continuously, like not falling off of the practice, is suggested here in the Yoga Sutras. Satkara asivito, performed and followed with love. That's a very Pragyanananda statement, with love. So when we're doing this practice, whatever the practice is, this is do it with a loving attitude. Dridha bhumihi, firm ground. So let me see. Okay, so I want on the etymology of a couple of these words here. Satkara. So sat means truth or consciousness, we could say, truth or awareness. Kara means to do, to take actions. So satkara. So Pragyananda, he doesn't have the etymology in his translation. This is just the etymology that somehow has gotten stuck in my brain, but sat means truth, kara means action. Jaya Om Shiva Om Kara, the Omkara, to make the sound Om. Ahamkara, the Ahamkara is that which is making the sense of I. Or in the Sikh scriptures, Karta Purdik, the doer of all, that which is taking actions in all things. Karta has got that K-A-R, and then Sanskrit, it's K-A-R-A. Kara, the doer, the movement, the action. So performing truthful actions, satkara. And then the last word in this sutra, bhumihi. So bhumihi, we are in the bhulokaha, so earth plane, firm ground. Pragyananda translated as firm ground, but bhumihi is referring to the stability of the earth plane. All right. So that's Sutra 14. Practice becomes firmly grounded when well attended to for a long time without a break and in all earnestness. So whatever it is, go for it. So Sutra 15, I have two different translations here, one from Swami Satchidananda. I like Satchidananda's translations, and if my memory serves me, maybe I shouldn't say this. I don't think he did the translation for Integral Yoga, Swami Satchidananda. I think he had a translator do it, and then he did the commentary. I think it says that in the introduction. But the consciousness of self-mastery and one who is free from craving for objects seen and heard about is non-attachment. So that's Satchidananda's. The consciousness of self-mastery and one who is free from craving of objects seen and heard about is non-attachment. Now, Swami Paravabananda from the Vedanta Society, non-attachment is self-mastery. It is freedom from desire for what is seen or heard. That's a little less laborious. They're very similar. Non-attachment is self-mastery. It is freedom from desire for what is seen and heard. So again, the last three classes we talked endlessly about non-attachment, genuine non-attachment versus phony non-attachment. So, but this is we're just reviewing this sutra one more time as we're heading out of this long talk we've been having about non-attachment. And then Sutra 16, when there is non-thirst for even the gunas, due to realization of the Purusha, that is supreme non-attachment. Okay, so now he's defining non-attachment in this super lofty way. Non-attachment in its fullest sense is realization of the true self, right? So it's not just like wanting to disentangle from uncomfortable situations. That's preliminary non-attachment, right? Which could be functional or dysfunctional depending on how it's applied. So, but to have real non-attachment, you're having to have something that's making you realize that infinite consciousness. There's lots of things that can make that happen. So That was Swami Satchidananda's translation. I have three different translations here. When through knowledge of the Atman, one ceases to desire any manifestation of nature, then that is the highest kind of non-attachment. So, interesting things, Swami Paravahananda, he's talking about the Atman. The word Atman is not used in the Yoga Sutras. It uses Purusha, because the Yoga Sutras don't use the word Atman. That is a Vedanta term, where the Purusha is the Yoga Sutra term. So he's kind of doing like a Vedanta translation by using the word Atman. So when through knowledge of the Atman, or you could say Purusha, one ceases to desire any manifestation of nature. So he's using the translation manifestation of nature. Satchidananda said the gunas. So the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are the blanking out.
Qualities of the energy.
The qualities, yes. There's another simple way to explain it that's escaping me. But yes, the qualities, the gunas, the attributes. So manifestations of nature, all of the play of nature. So it doesn't mean that we're not still in it. It just means that we're not desiring it. So they say, like, that's funny for me because I have a 3-year-old, but when your toys when you're a little kid, you no longer have attachment to them when you're an adult. You want them so bad when you're a kid and then you grow up, right? But when you grow up towards spiritual realization, all of the things that we usually crave, we still can have them, we can still play with them, but it becomes not so emotionally charged. So Swami Vivekananda, that is extreme non-attachment, which gives up the qualities and comes from the knowledge of the real nature of Purusha. It's a little wordy, but the reason I have all three of them here is it's interesting because one translator uses Atman instead of Purusha. The other two use Purusha. Swami Satchidananda has Purusha and then true self in brackets, which is not even really the best. Purusha means supreme person, which is interesting because it's very theological. Purusha versus Atman is very theological. So, but we won't go into that whole tangent right now. So that's Sutra 16. Okay, I'm getting further along than I thought I would here. So like I've said, we've been in this zone for many classes now, reviewing these sutras, talking about them in light of the gunas, talking about dysfunctional spiritual communities, and how non-attachment is often a big part of that. So I think we're actually officially leaving that here as we go into Sutra 17, where Samadhi is introduced. And I said that earlier, but that's where my slide has brought us. So chapter 1, and I said this earlier, chapter 1 is the Samadhi Pada. So it's the chapter about Samadhi. But Samadhi is not brought up until Sutra 17. So since we're getting to the end of the class here, and we're not going to go super deep into Sutra 17, I want to do like a little bit of an overview of everything we've gone through in all of the classes up to this point. So Sutra 1 through 4 go into the definition of yogic states. So it's when yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the thought mind, of the thought waves. Then the seer abides in its own true nature. So now begins the teaching of yoga. Yoga is the cessation of the mind. Then the seer can be in its own true nature. So sutras 1 through 5 talk about the different qualities of thought waves. So we talked about that. I don't remember exactly which classes, but we went into a lot of details about the thought waves and how it relates to different yogic traditions and whatnot. Sutras 12 through 16, which we've been in for the last 4 classes. It's the importance of practice and non-attachment. And then tonight we really brought in a little bit more of what's the difference between abhyasa and sadhana. Abhyasa is general approach to life. Sadhana is your specific tradition that you've really aligned yourself with, and you've made a bit of a commitment, and then you carve out time to attend to it. Where abhyasa is the general lifestyle mindset, yamas and niyamas, non-grasping and contentment, all those types of things. So, and then we get into the next two sutras, which is 17 and 18, where we're going to get into, it introduces samadhi and its basic qualities. So, Vitaraka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita, Rupa, Anugamat, Sama, Pragnatyaha. Vitkara, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita, Rupa, Anugamata, Sampragnata. So that last word there in Sutra 17, Sampragnata, Sampragna, Sampragnata, Samadhi. So this is translation from Swami Satchidananda. Sampragnata Samadhi, distinguished contemplation, is how he's translating it, is accompanied by reasoning, reflecting, rejoicing, and pure I amness. It's very big Lebowski sounding, pure I amness. Okay, so, and Swami Parvananda of the Vedanta Society, concentration upon a single object may reach 4 stages: examination, discrimination, joyful peace, and simple awareness of individuality. So both of these, it's got these 4 qualities. And I was not prepared to go any further here, but I'm just going to riff on this a little bit, and we'll jump into it more in the next class. We're going to go, there's the word asmita. Asmita is the sense of separate self. Rupa means form, and vitkara and vichara. Vichara is reasoning or discrimination. We've got both of those translations here. Rejoicing and joyful peace is how they're defining ananda. So vitaraka, vichara, ananda, asmita, rupa. So this is when so sampragnata samadhi is concentration. We've gotten to some point where we have concentration on a single object. When we get into this state, well, first I just want to say sampragnata samadhi is not that hard to get into. So when we talk about yogic states like nirvikalpa samadhi, which is seedless samadhi, that's very rare. There's not that many people that get to nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, sampragnata samadhi, this is very wordy, this translation. You could almost just say it's like you're getting out of your head, and you're no longer always thinking from comparison, right? Like good and bad. It's a little bit more where your intuition is able to function. It's like the early stages of basic intuitive knowledge of how things open and unfold. So sampragnata samadhi, it could happen from watching the sunset, where you're just like, wow, it's so beautiful. And then you feel this joy arising, and your reasoning mind or your discrimination faculty, the discerning faculty, is just feeling this like sense of oneness, and it's not being pulled back and forth. Your sense of asmita or ego is not so active. It's been put dormant, and you're like in this form of the rupa of being like really focused on this thing. So it could be an internal or an external thing, especially with sampragnata samadhi, as I understand it. It's not as demanding to always be like internalized. Like if you're going into the deeper samadhis that we'll get into as we go deeper into this chapter, and this stuff gets pretty complex to explain the different levels of samadhi. But yeah, sampragnata samadhi is like the beginning of the journey of samadhi. There's still a sense of I. You still have a sense of I in sampragnata samadhi. So when you get into the deeper samadhis, nobody's home. And that's a little bit rare. Now, some people get into the place where you can like access that like really quickly, or like some people will have experiences where the sense of self completely dissolves for, a long period of time. And then who's to even put time on it when that happens, because there's nobody home. I remember being with my meditation teacher, Yogacharya John Williams. He's one of the Kriya Yoga International teachers. He's like, I don't know, Baba, I can't really talk about it because there's nobody home whenever it happens. There's nobody there.
Probably what Yogananda experienced when it would go, in that bliss state for long periods of time.
Yeah. They often, another kind of samadhi that it's not in the Yoga Sutras, it's more of a bhakti yoga samadhi, is bhava samadhi, which Ramakrishna was in bhava samadhi a lot. So kirtan gets people in bhava samadhi. So especially with like community kirtan, congregational chanting, where everybody kind of gets into the mood, and you can get quite ecstatic. And I don't remember where I read it, but when Yogananda went back to India, I forget it might have been the Autobiography of a Yogi, but I think it's in some other book. But everybody got together and they're doing kirtan, and he would go into ecstasy states. It's different than going into like breathless state. The breathless state's a different quality of absorption. Now, an interesting thing about the kinds of samadhi in Ayurveda, they talk about the lower forms of samadhi, the demonic forms of samadhi, because samadhi just means absorption, right? So like if you're getting God absorption, or if you're getting absorption into the kirtan, I'd like to think that often when we do kirtan, a lot of us are in mild states of bhava samadhi. You don't have any other thoughts. You're only listening to the mantra. You're only feeling the music, and it's just moving through you. You're gone, and you're blissed out. It's easy. That's why I say bhakti yoga is easy and safe. You get really high really quickly, and there's not this like wrestling with the mind, and like you don't have when you wrestle with the mind, more like intense karmas can come up. Where like if you just had fun singing and dancing, it's not so like extreme. But where was I going with this about? Yeah, so bhava samadhi is different than breathless samadhis. There was something else I was going to say there. But yes, accessible. Sampragnata samadhi, like if you get into a really scholarly breakdown of the different kinds of samadhi that are talked about in different texts, there could possibly be similarity between like bhava samadhi that people get into in kirtan and sampragnata samadhi, where if you're going into breathless state, it's a little different. That when you're going into the breathless state, people are usually involved in some sort of deep silent meditation practices. Hariharananda, Pragyananda's guru, my teacher John's guru, he would go into it in public and just slip into breathless state, and people would have to like bring him back. CPR, yeah. They start like pumping his chest and be like, so I think that one of the things I really like about Ramakrishna's teachings is Swami Medananda calls it the many-roomed mansion. And I grew up with the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg, and in Swedenborg's teachings, there's all these different heaven realms. So you've got like a Christian heaven, and everybody's got all their Christian stuff going on. You got the Muslim heaven and the Jewish heaven and indigenous, call it like tribal heavens. And everybody goes into these different places where they're at different flavors. And they're not necessarily higher or lower. Although Swedenborg does have them categorized by those who can forget about themselves more, and the person who can be of service the most will get into the most communion with the divine, and those would be what he called celestial heavens. But you see that with these kinds of samadhis. It's like if somebody's going into a really deep energetic bliss state through kirtan, who's to say it's higher or lower than somebody who's going into the breathless state, right? They have different qualities. People will be like, who is to say? There's lots of people who are to say, but I'm saying I don't want to be that guy. Like if people are having certain quality of mystical experiences, like they talk about the elephant and the 10 blindfolded people, and they say, put your hand on it and describe the elephant. And one of them's like, oh, it was kind of hairy. And another one was like, it felt like a tree stump, and he was touching the leg. And another one was like, well, it was kind of moist and there were holes, and he was touching the trunk. And they all explain different parts of the elephant that they talk. So it's like, what individual jiva or individual soul can experience all of the possible bliss states that are available and simultaneously know it all? I don't know. Some people say Ramakrishna was kind of playing with that, where he was going into all of these different traditions and experiencing the pinnacle of all the different religions. But then do we really have to have like a hierarchy? You know, so I don't think we do. I think that each individual soul could have various different spiritual ecstasies that they could experience. And so all of the different samadhis, the absorption comes from getting the ego out of the way, and they can play out through different techniques and methods, which is why people call yoga a science, which I struggle with that term, but but it's a methodology that is recreatable and reproducible. So in that sense, it is a science. So with that, I will get off of the slides and all right. So does anybody have anything they wanted to share or any thoughts?
Thanks,
People,
Trevor. That was wonderful.
thank you. Thanks for being here again. All right. Well, hopefully this recorded on YouTube, because I forgot to hit the record button on Zoom. But if not, you know, hey, whatever. I'll have to do the class again. All right. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Om. May all beings be happy and free. May all enjoy their unique form of spiritual ecstasies and spiritual blisses. May all of the obstacles in our spiritual path be removed, and may all people be free from suffering. Om, peace, peace, peace.